welcome to Hemp Hound TV. My name is Kevin Jones, your host, and we're live here from sunny Devon. Well, not really live, but it's also not really sunny out there. But I just thought I'd drop in a couple of updates and let you know what's been going on. Now, first and foremost, in regards to Sprocket, the director for treats, he's been busy today, also being director of security. We've had company, so he's nice and tuckered out after doing his multiple checks. As for the imposter on the last Hemp Hound TV episode, let's hope that he just keeps quiet. So anyway, I was supposed to be dropping off a show in regards to my public interest disclosure complaint against the FSA. I've already done one in regards to products that weren't available on 130220, and I was next to do products that have breached the 1 milligram rule that have been validated. I'd come up with a bit more punchier title than that by the time, but that got delayed because the other day I had a meeting with the FSA. I say the other day, on the 30th of last month, and it was to discuss said complaint. And I just thought I'd kind of give you a breakdown of that and a little kind of catch up on what's going on. So without further ado, allow me to get the glasses on. Right. So this meeting, I've got to say, it went really well. I was talking with a Mr. S and a Dr. C. I'll be honest, Mr. S was pretty much a straight-talking Yorkshireman, and the investigating officer. Mr. C, I believe, is the deputy policy director with a background in chemistry, which was kind of handy. Between them, they were kind of like don't get me wrong when I say there's a complementary and convenient tag team, because Mr. S, he confessed that he didn't really have a true understanding of novel food. And Dr. C, well, he was getting up to a level of knowledge on the topic, and with his chemistry background, that and the complexity of the complaint, we were able to break things down to the bare bones, which is quite important because I did throw a lot of stuff at them. So yeah, the meeting itself was not to indicate a direction of sorts, more to iron out the uncertainties of the wording around the complaint itself, right? So I'll just run through my kind of basic feelings about how the conversation went there. So number one, we talked about 130220. Now I have kind of indicated that I've done a video on this. There's more proof on the companies that I have indicated. The reason why there wasn't so much proof, although there was still proof on the actual complaint, was because I was drawing the FSA's attention to what was blatant there. I mean, everything else is when you start looking at social media and whatnot, you can normally find out when a product's been launched, when the hype starts around that. If that's not there, then you do have to question. But in regards to 130220, Dr. C, he said something quite interesting, and I think it's a little bit more encompassing than just the complaint, and he said, have we communicated effectively with the industry in regards to this topic? Now, I say this topic, but he does ask that question a few times. Now, I think that's quite important. I'm going to kind of sidetrack on this, on the conversation with them, because there is a lot of misinformation out there at the moment. We've got some companies that are white labeling, others are offering new products that either were on the list before their creation, the FSA's public list, or on the FSA public list at all. There's a lot of people who also seem to think they can jump applications, which it's interesting. And that's it. You know, who said people could launch new products at the moment? I don't remember anyone who said that white label was an option now. I understand it is in the EU, but not here. And you know, other than an agreement that exists with RP427, what's given people the indicator that they can jump applications? It's a bit confusing because, like, I haven't seen anything, and I know other people haven't seen anything, but there is whispers of emails and all of that from third parties being taken as gospel almost, like, you know, and that's something really worrying, and I'm glad that Dr. C kind of indicated that. More so as we went through that conversation, but in that topic, I did get a little bit confused, because how could there be confusion in regard to Rulero Uno, as it were, like, you know, because 130220, things were said on the day, things were said beyond that day, about that day, we went past deadlines, it was still that day. I don't think anyone's kind of heard anything otherwise. I mean, there was an industry update that was filtered through associations not so long ago that said, moving on, we're going by a case-by-case basis, but that's not what was happening before. And to be perfectly honest, case-by-case basis, I did indicate to the gentleman that it's a little bit of a naff term that suggests that one person might get through on the same merits where someone else might fail. You know, that needs to be kind of considered, that language, I do believe, and I don't think they saw that. So we also then kind of talked about the 1 milligram rule, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I like a little bit of fat, shall we say, full fat, medium fat, something like that. I'm not too fussy, and it's not something I'm particularly happy that I had to bring up. But at the end of the day, it is there. It does show that people have been validated against the flow of the rules, and certainly then that is a concern for a process that is supposed to be all about the rules. And certainly with the 1 milligram rule, you would then also associate consumer safety with that. You know, how can we have a food that is actually a drug by UK guidelines? There is a big concern there, and they did agree. I feel that that's something that needs to be looked into, so I won't go too much past there. Then we got monopolies market. Now, that was a big topic, and I will actually be doing a big video on this at some point, possibly with the first guest appearance on Hemp Hound TV. We'll see how that goes. But if we bring it down to the kind of back to the bones, as I was saying earlier, one of the big issues in novel foods is the fact that we're having every product of every description being defined and run by the requirements devised by of 16 lab reports of pharmaceutical grade isolate. You know, that doesn't reflect everything. And then, of course, you've got the World Health Organization, the fact that the information that was used by them to determine the requirement, determine an RDA of 2,400 milligrams a day of CBD, and the Center of Toxicity basically took that information, took 16 lab reports from GW, an industry competitor, with a whole list of patents for CBD and other cannabinoid preparations. And then basically, yeah, got rid of all the data from the World Health Organization and used those 16 lab reports to basically say that we shouldn't have any more than 70 milligrams a day. It's a bit weird, that, isn't it? And yeah, it's certainly something that has been talked about quite openly in the industry. So we can't do anything about the lab reports because, I mean, at the end of the day, they exist. But what the gentleman, Dr. C and Mr. S kind of indicated was that they can have a look to see if there was truly indeed undeclared interests, and then from there it would be possibly a case of determining whether it's appropriate that they accepted that information on the basis that there could have been an undeclared interest. It sounds a little bit complicated in wording for me. It'll be interesting to see how that comes back, but I've got to be honest, this isn't the area of the only area of the cannabis world where GW seem to have an influence. So I think it's only kind of fair, really, that if this is looked into, then at least we're kind of seeing if there truly is a web of influence that extends outside of their remit, that being the medicinal area. Or was it just someone who said, hey, there's this company in the UK, I've seen their lab reports, let's go by this and let's just disregard the World Health Organization's data. Who knows? But I'd like to think that that gets looked into. I can only wait for the FSA's reply, which should be in a few days, which will then give their wording of how they understand my complaint. So I look forward to seeing that. Now, beyond there, we talked about food crimes, and basically that kind of got whittled down to the representation between isolate and synthetic first and foremost, and then of course the lab reports for isolate governing whole plant products. But first and foremost, we talked about the synthetic, the ultra pure tag, and that, I mean, it's a bit of a bugbear to a few people, because in all, you know, honestly, you can use that same tag for a pharmaceutical grade isolate. So is it a misleading term? Because this, that, you know, if you don't say it's ultra pure synthetic or ultra pure plant derived, you know, it's not really giving the consumer or the companies potentially buying those products an accurate representation, and there does need to be that distinction. You know, it was nice that Dr. C had his chemistry background. He did kind of take on board this part of the complaint, and certainly there didn't seem to be any kind of friction or argument in there. So yeah, there's that, and then of course there is the fact that those 16 lab reports also govern the requirement for whole plant products. That's of course apples and pears, isn't it? So hopefully that again will be looked at, because you know, it's misrepresenting a product. You know, it's substitution as well, really, if you think about it, because you're stating the dynamics of a product as such, when actually the product is derived from or created in a different way, or into a different format, and ultimately is not isolate, if you know what I mean. So yeah, again, waiting for their reply. Now we did talk about a few other bits and pieces as well, and let's start with white labeling. I'll be honest, I'm frustrated with the novel foods rules. 130220, I believe, has stifled the industry. The 1 milligram rule, it's kind of been a bit of an underpinning of the industry, but at the end of the day, it's frustrating as well. The white label rule, though, that doesn't exist in any other food format or novel food route other than CBD novel foods. This is, of course, a bit of a frustration and also something that has stifled the market. Now, Dr. C seemed to recognise that issue, but of course, this was a meeting to understand the complaint and not give an indication of direction. So recognising an issue, of course, is nice. It would just be nice to see where we go further from that. Naming individuals. Wow. I fully respect that there's a name or two that I've dropped in my complaint. Now, it's got to the point that the complaint has been heard, so I'm not going to mention any names beyond here, right? It might be a position that's something I can't really retract, certainly when I complete the videos that I'm going to do on the complexity of the complaint itself. So head of novel foods, I can say, I won't say a name. Equally, I need to kind of point out to him as well as others and companies alike that this isn't anything personal, this complaint. At the end of the day, I've been about for a fair bit, and I've been looking after companies. I've been advising companies on bits and pieces before novel foods had rules, as well as the rules on novel foods when they became apparent. So if you're going to be a spokesperson in that kind of capacity, you have to kind of respect that your name might be named in question. I hope that that certainly people in that can see past my writings and know that there is no malicious intent there. Certainly, it's, to me, all about getting industry concerns listened to, because they are wider concerns that have been mentioned over time now, and certainly that needs to be respected. The fact that I've been able to get these listened to now, fair enough, but it's an industry concern, not just me. So yeah, we will be stopping that from this point, as far as I'm concerned. When the investigations are closed, the investigations are closed, and that's it. And that was adequately, and I believe clearly, indicated to Mr. S and Dr. C. Yeah. And then new products, and this comes back to this like communications issue, and it makes me wonder if in some kind of way it's recognized that someone has got the impression of something from somewhere that might in some way be tied back to the FSA, because at the end of the day, how else are you going to get the impression that you can release new products or white label, for example? It would have to be in some way traceable back to the horse's mouth. We did touch on the fact that companies are launching products that seem to have been listed beforehand, and we've also touched on products not being on the list at all. So that's just a heads up on that, because we're talking a minority here. The vast majority of the people have played the game, and they're the ones, as am I, who's getting frustrated when someone kind of drops 1,000 ml capsules, or I don't know, for example, a cold brew coffee. So moving on from there, because at the end of the day, that was pretty much all of the conversation. I'd like to thank Mr. S and Dr. C for their patience. That certainly, I think, were a lot calmer than I was, but who knows how they felt before I was going in there, what to expect. I mean, I have written a few kind of scathing articles. They might have thought they were going to get some kind of raving madman. So I'm glad that I didn't fit any expectations should they have been in that area. Yeah, it was a good chat, and I look forward to their response on this matter. Now, folks, moving on. MHRA. They are back, and certainly it is something that needs to be paid attention to. Now, they just released guidance for companies who want to grow unlicensed cannabis for medicinal use. Don't get your hopes up, because there's a merry dance between contacting the MHRA on this and the Home Office for that to get the ball rolling. It's this is never going to be an easy process unless you've got the pennies to throw at it and the time to pay for it. Now, this is a double-edged sword. The plus side is that we could eventually be getting a sensible domestic supply, which could bring down prices to affordable levels for those who require medicinal or access to medicinal cannabis. Brilliant, right? However, here's the downside. The MHRA, they've been busy over algorithms, dealing with the lurgy. Right, now that kind of seems to have tailed off. They've released these guidelines. Now, if they're working in tandem to release licenses for people to, be able to supply a medicinal cannabis market, you've got to be able to offer reassurances or protections to the intention of that license, as it were. And the only way I can see that happening is by targeting CBD companies who, for a couple of years now, have been able to gradually build up on the complexity of the claims that are now kind of generic as they were. We had the Advertising Standards Authority recently post an article about a couple of companies. I won't say their names. At the end of the day, they've had their tap on the wrist, but they were saying stuff like anti-inflammatory and deals with chronic pain. Now, we've got to accept that CBD products can do wonderful things. That's without a doubt. But if you're paying for licenses for products to be used in that context, then those who have been making those claims but their products are untested, they might get targeted. So what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, be careful of the claims that you're making. Certainly, I would advise anyone not to be making out their claims anyway. But equally, be careful with what you say about your product, because certainly, I've talked about the Tiger Report a few times, and that in itself indicates a direction for the UK to become a powerhouse for medicinal CBD and cannabinoid focused products. So with that in mind, there's a regulation of that industry are coming, and well, that industry kind of looks a little bit more medicinal than food at the moment. And that's the thing, because in 2018, I went to an AGM for the CTA in Warwick, and Dr. Chris Jones, who was the head of borderline medicines at the time, he stood up in front of a packed hall and said, we're waiting for the consumer to view your products as medicinal. That's when we'll jump in. Right? Well, I think this is probably where they're going to start jumping in a little bit more. So yeah, watch yourselves on that. Now, lastly, it's a little bit of a personal jig time here. Some crazy person in Parliament emailed me the other day, same day as my meeting with the FSA, to tell me that a paper I'd submitted as evidence had been accepted and indexed by the Home Affairs Committee's inquiry on drugs. I know. I was happy. I mean, I say crazy because I go through the motions on this. Early 1900s racisms, working through the 1961 first UNCND, 1971 Moda and the announcement of the war on drugs by Nixon, and then the recent FOIs that show you're anywhere between 3 to 12 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis, dependent on the colour of your skin. But then I also touch on the ECS, that cannabis is a food before a medicine, that we all have a right to life, and that by extension is the right to top up our endocannabinoid systems as we see fit. I proper warts and all submission. I even went into the absurdity of when Boris Johnson got elected as Conservative Party leader, 2019 I think it was, and everyone he was standing against was like, well, I used drugs once, yes, so did I. Yeah. I know how to spell Rizzler. It's absurd stuff, and yet they'll kind of address it when they're trying to get somewhere, but they won't address it with the people, and that is kind of, well, like I said, warts and all. I did add a little look as well. There is GW Farmers submission in there, which is of course quite interesting. They say controlled cannabinoids are dangerous, yet they're sitting on a list of over 140 patents, most of which do involve controlled cannabinoids. They say CBD needs more political direction, despite the fact that we've got their 16 lab reports directing us as it is. And all of that, of course, comes with their 20-year plus long, strong working relationship with the Home Office. It's kind of like name dropping. It's like me going to a party and saying, "Yeah, well, I met Snoop Dogg once," or, well, okay, maybe not. Yeah, all right then. So, I'll tell you what. Have a little look, and I'll leave a link in the comments below, because there's also like a submission by Pete Hitchens. Right, and I invite you to read it. Now, he's historic, isn't he, in having a can of grudge, and I always kind of get very interested when someone starts spouting extreme views, shall we say, of the good herb, because we have been surrounded over the years by extreme views, but the vast majority of us are seeing that those were indeed extreme views. But there seems to be those that are just clinging on, and Peter Hitchens, he strikes me as one of them. He's a bit Anslinger-esque almost. I mean, not quite like, I'm not going to say the racism, but certainly I will suggest the reefer madness angle. But he's up there with Alison Hernandez, the PCC for Devon, Cornwall, and the Scilly Isles, who believes cannabis who should be rescheduled in line with heroin and crack cocaine. And what's his name? Dave Sidwick, the PCC for Dorset, stating that every 4 minutes, someone in the USA succumbs to cannabis psychosis. The thing is, if that was true, they wouldn't be talking about legalization or decriminalization at federal level, and you certainly wouldn't have had the amount of states legalize either for medicinally and or recreationally as many as we have. So I mean that's an absurd thing to say. Well, both of them are all absurd things to say, and then of course you get to Peter Hitchens's submission. So basically, I'm going to send this to them, and I'm going to ask them if any of them would be up to discuss their views on cannabis. I think it'd be good viewing. Certainly, I can assure them, because I'll send this, that I will be respectful of those views. Certainly, we can talk about them, about any outlining evidence that kind of backs them up, and see where we go from on there, because if you've got such contrasting views on the wider edge of society, when we've got over 50% of the public, according to government polls, saying that we should either have legalized or decriminalized cannabis, and you've got 10% saying, "Oh, we don't know," and the rest are like, "Leave it as it is." You're going against the view of the public. So yeah, I'll send this to anyone. However, if anyone watches this and they have some kind of direct connection that I don't have and can pass it their way, do encourage them to get in contact with me. Email address below, and yeah, let's see if we can have a good conversation. Anyway, I've waffled on enough. It is now officially the weekend, so do remove your working hat off and have a fantastic couple of days. I'll catch you then. Bye.